In this tutorial, we're going to be looking at adding walls, floors, and roofs to our house. So I'm in my first floor plan right now, and I want to start out by drawing my walls. So I'm going to grab my wall tool up in the architecture tab. Now you want to pick your wall thickness kind of depending on how thick the walls in your house are. So I can grab my tape measure tool and measure these, and they're about like 3.5 inches. I'm going to call it 4. Then I'm going to grab the wall tool. I'm going to have just generic 4 inches selected. You can choose any of these walls up to 6, 8, or 12 inches. And for our height, I want to have this go to my second floor. So I'm basically drawing this from the first up to the second floor. Then the location line I want to set to either finish face exterior or interior. Now the difference between this and say wall center line is wall center line will draw the wall on the center line of that wall. But if you switch it to finish face interior or exterior, it'll put that line that you're drawing it in the finished face of the wall. If you find that you're not drawing on the right side, you can hit the space bar and that'll switch the wall back and forth. Okay, so I've got all those settings set. I'm just going to drag up to this wall and then start drawing down. And I'm just tracing over the existing walls. Now places where we get to a T kind of like this, instead of clicking here and then dragging over to here, actually what I want to do is I'm just going to click that wall like that. Then I'm going to draw a new wall that goes from this side over to here. Now you'll probably notice that it's a little hard to see the walls. If I turn the line thickness on, you can see that the line thickness is thicker, but it still doesn't stand out that much. So a way to make it a little easier to read is down in the toolbar here next to the scale. So for the detail level, I would set that either at medium or fine. For the visual style, you can change that to shaded. And now your walls will show up as a gray poche, so it'll be much easier to see them. So I'm going to continue on this side here. And while you're editing, you can actually turn the line thickness off. If you go up to the toolbar up here for thin lines or type TL. So that'll get rid of the line thickness so it's easier to see. Now in a situation like this where you have kind of a wall and then in this house there's a column, I'm going to show you how to put in columns in a minute. So right now we're just going to leave a gap between this wall and this wall. Alright, we got one more wall right here. So this is kind of a confusing house, so you'll kind of see as you go along, it'll be a little clearer to understand things, especially when you look at it in the 3D model. So we've got the walls drawn for the first floor. Now I'm going to jump up to the second floor. And I'm going to continue drawing the walls. So I could draw these walls as being 4 inches, or I could draw them as being 6, but I'm going to show you how to make a custom wall type, say at like 4.5. So if I make these walls at 6 inches, maybe in situations like this where you have these stairs wrapping around and maybe the tread here would be an extra or 2 inches less if you made it at 6 inches, and it would be kind of an awkward step. So I have my wall tool selected right here, basic wall generic 4 inches. I'm going to click on edit type, then I'm going to click on duplicate. So I'm basically making a copy of this wall, and I'm just going to call it 4.5 inches. Then under the structure, I'm going to click edit. For the thickness, I'm going to type 4.5 inches. Click OK, and click OK. So we basically made a copy of the 4-inch wall, and now it is 4.5 inches. I'm going to start drawing my walls. Again, just tracing over. In a situation like this, I'm just going to keep drawing this wall straight across and not worry about this extra thickness here. And it just so happens that the walls on this building are the same on the inside and the outside. So in a situation like this where I'm snapping this wall doesn't exactly line up with this wall, so I'm just going to start from this point and just keep drawing across. So when I come back, you'll see there's a very small gap. So I can use my trim or extend single element. So first I'm going to click on sort of the top of the T, if this was a big T right here. So click on this wall first and then this wall, and that'll join them together. So going back to the wall tool, continue drawing over here. And if you ever need to get out of the wall command, you can just hit escape, so then you can start drawing somewhere else. Then here, see how the wall is on the wrong side. All I have to do is click space, and that'll flip the wall over to the other side. And I'll go back here and just use that trim tool to connect that wall. And I can see there's a column here, but the wall does start around here. And if you're ever drawing the wall up in here and say, it would lock to this point, it could also lock to this line. You could even draw it out into the wall, and it'll just merge those two walls together. So I'm not really sure what's going on with this wall. I'm just going to draw these collection over here. See, and even here it's hard to lock on to these walls because there's a slight gap in both. So I'm just going to draw one over like that and then use our trim tool again and connect those two. So the rest of the walls on this floor are all curtain walls, which means they're basically just big panes of glass with mullions in them, separating them out. If I show you a picture of this, so basically what this wall type is right here, so you can see it's a lot of glass and there's mullions separating the different areas. So the way that you can draw that, instead of actually putting in a window, I'll just get my wall tool, put the wall type in the properties, I'm going to drag all the way to the bottom and then click on curtain wall. So again, I'm going to make sure that my height is set to the third floor because I'm on the second floor. I'm going to start drawing the exterior here. And you want to make sure that the pane is going on the left side. So I'm going to click the space bar and that'll flip the pane to the left, and you can see that showing up as I draw this down. And you'll see that the glass turns blue once you finish drawing it. So I'm going to do these other curtain walls here. Even when there's a door, you can have a door and a curtain wall. So I'm just going to keep dragging this across. And I'm going to pick up right here. And right here. These are getting a little weird. It does not want to lock to this. So what you can do is actually get the align tool, click on this line, and then move it down until you see the shape handle for the curtain wall, and that should pull it up to there. Sometimes you have to zoom in really close to get it to lock onto something. You can even see here it wants to snap to parallel to the line that we drew below. So I'm going to try going up on maybe up here. Okay, then I'm going to draw this down to this column. Again, you'll see it doesn't want to align to that, so I'm just going to use my align tool. Click on the column and then click on the curtain wall. Alright, so let's move on to the third floor. Alright, so now we're on the third floor. I'm going to continue with the walls. I want to make sure that I switch back to our generic 4.5 inch wall, because we're not drawing curtain walls anymore. And again, I'd have to reset the location line to either the finish face exterior or interior. And you'll notice that the view style between our last floor plan didn't change over to this, because right now we're in the hidden line. I can change it back to the shaded, so that's a little easier to see our walls. And notice even here it's not snapping between where these walls intersect. And sometimes it does, but if it didn't snap there, I could always start drawing up here and then drag the wall down. So you just have to move around to different points if it's not snapping the way you want it to. And remember, places where you have doors, there should be a wall through that, because a door has to be hosted by a wall. You can't just have a freestanding door. So I can see in a situation like this that we have two doors right here. Each one of them is around maybe 2 foot, 2'3", 2'4". And remember that a door or even a window can only be hosted in a wall. And right now there doesn't look like there's any wall between them. But I'm going to have to draw one, because if I want to put a door in here, there has to be a wall between these two lines. I'm going to draw my wall down in this area. But then where that door starts, which I'm actually going to pick this line right here. So I'm going to draw the wall on this side. Now I could make the doors exactly the width of this, so basically the wall would disappear. But there still has to be a wall there. Again, I'm going to line it up with that line that's running through all of these. And if you remember, I can draw that wall a little bit longer, so then once I draw this wall in, it'll connect the two together. And say you drew this wall, I could even move this point over to here. I could just drag the blue point up until it locks to there. So you can move walls around after you've drawn them. Say you had like two walls that were like this. Maybe this one didn't even connect this far out. Maybe it was just joined with this wall. So another tool you can use in the Modify panel is the trim or extend a corner. So basically you can click on the two walls that should be going towards the corner, and it'll show you that dotted line, and it'll basically connect them two together. Alright, so I've got all the walls drawn, but now I'm going to go in with the curtain wall tool and get the rest of the curtain walls. Alright, so all the curtain walls are drawn. I'm going to switch to my 3D view, You can get to up in the very top panel here, default 3D view. You can also see it if you expand the 3D views in the project browser and click on 3D. So we've got all the walls drawn, but there's no floors. If you find if you're rotating around, you can do that if you hold shift and then click on your scroll wheel. Like right now it's hard to tell where the mouse is centering around something. So if you click on an object and then start rotating, that's where your the view will rotate around. So it can be helpful if, say, you want to look around in this area, you can highlight this object, and then your view will rotate just around there. So you can jump around to something on the opposite side, then move around there. And then another shortcut for, say, you want to zoom to this whole view, you can type in Z and then A, and that'll zoom all. So it basically zoom everything in that view. Alright, so we only have walls, and now we're going to put in some floors. So in our first floor, this is sitting on the ground, so I'm not going to draw any floors for the time being. I will come in later because there's a little elevated area with some steps. But I'm going to start on the second floor. So in the floor tool in the architecture tab, so click on that. Basically that puts you into a edit sketch mode. So you see this, everything will turn green up here. Basically everything you need to do in the floor is in this tab. You notice if you go to other tabs, they're grayed out because while you're in the create floor, you can only be in this mode. Then with the X and the check marks, the X will cancel you out of the floor sketching, and the check mark will finish your command. So basically you have to draw a boundary of the floor, and it has to be a closed boundary. So you can manually draw the flooring with any of these sketch tools here. You can also use the pick lines tool to pick any existing lines in the drawing. And you can also use the pick walls tool. So this will actually pick the walls that you just drew. So in my instance, only about half of the walls I can choose because the other ones, there may be some type of gap, or there's like a balcony here which I have to manually trace over. So you can see that the wall that I could select ends here, and then there will be a balcony right here. So I'm actually going to use maybe just my normal line tool, and I can draw in where that balcony is. And right here we pick up the curtain wall. Actually, it looks like I may not have drawn this curtain wall. So I could use like the pick lines tool, which is this green marker here, and just pick this line. Then maybe I can switch back to this wall tool here. And you'll notice, since the line has to be continuous, even right here, these lines are not connected. So I can use my trim or extend a corner, basically pick the two lines and connect them together. And even here I notice this line will come down, there'll be a slight gap there, so I guess one way I could do it is pick, say, that line, and then trim this line to there, and then trim that line to there. It's kind of a little messy, but it'll be hidden by this column. Alright, so we've got another balcony here. I'm just going to hand trace over this one. So where I have my stairs right now, I don't want to draw my floor there, so I want to have it come back where this curtain wall is. So I'm going to use the pick walls, pick that curtain wall, then I'm going to select on this line with the pick lines and just make sure these two are connected together. Then instance where this line is running across, instead of using the pick walls tool again, it's a little cleaner to have like one continuous line that's going across. So I'm actually going to delete on this line right here, and basically this stair will come right up to this platform. So I'm going to pick my line there, and I can use my trim tool to pick these two lines coming together, and then pick these two lines. So I should have a continuous boundary. Then when you're drawing this, you can see the type of floor that's selected, generic 12-inch. I'm just going to leave it at a generic 12-inch and click OK. So you're going to get this message here, and it's saying, would you like the walls that go up to this floor's level to attach to this bottom? Which means that any walls that are below this, right now they're actually coming through this because they're going up to the same level. I'm just going to say no for now, but I'm going to show you what that means later. So I'm going to continue drawing another floor on my next level, level 3. So again, pick on floor. Here I'm just going to use my pick lines tool to get the edge of this sort of balcony. Then I can even switch over to my pick walls tool and pick on these. And you just got to be careful where your lines all meet, that they all connect and that they form a closed boundary. So even here, I'd have to clean that up with the trim tool. See, in a place like this, it's a little hard to tell what's going on since we have two stairs. And normally you wouldn't want to draw your floor in the stairs, but I'll show you how to make a shaft for the stair. So I'll actually draw our floor straight across this area. I can use my pick walls and then connect these two together. Do the same for this curtain wall. And that line will basically continue straight across. I'm just going to ignore this little section here. I'll use a pick walls tool, pick this curtain wall, and then I'm going to trim these two lines and extend to the corner these two lines. Okay, so that should be a continuous loop. We're going to click OK and the check mark. Just no for now. You notice if we switch to our 3D view that now we have some floors in here. If you only want to see your building in this view and not any of your plans, what you could do in the Properties panel for the view, under Visibility and Graphics, click on Edit, then switch over to the Imported categories, and then uncheck your DWG file. So this will turn that off, and you'll basically only see your house. And again, if your drawing isn't looking like this, it's probably due to the visual style. So down here next to the scale, you can check on this blue box. You can switch it between wireframe, hidden line, shaded, consistent colors. So it's basically shaded, but all the shades are the same. And then you can even do realistic. And this will use the materials that all of your components are drawn in. So you can see the glass is looking like glass, but everything else is just generic, so there's no materials applied to it. Alright, so now I want to show how to put in a column. So I've got columns for these. Instead of drawing a very thick wall, we're going to put a column in. So go to the Architecture tab, click on Column, and then click on Column Architectural. So right now it'll probably only have a wood column loaded in, so we're going to load in another column. So under the Modify here, click on Load Family, go down to Columns, and then just Rectangular Column. Click Open. And right now it just defaults to 24 by 24, and it has maybe 2 or 3 other sizes in there. Right now I'm just going to place a column here, but I want to make this roughly the same size as this column right here. So I'm going to do a quick measurement right here, and we're at 1 foot and 7/8, and it's going to give us, let's see, 2 foot 1 5/8. So I want to change this column to be the same as those dimensions. So just to remind myself what those are, I'm going to use a line dimension. So you go to the Annotate tab and Aligned. And you're just going to click on those two areas and then these two. So I got my dimension right there. So I'm going to click on this, and the same thing that we did with the wall before, I'm going to go to Edit Type. So I'm going to click on Duplicate, and normally you don't want to put the dimensions in for the column. So since the dimensions on this column aren't very round, I'm just going to kind of give it an arbitrary name for now. If you had a lot more columns, you'd want to name them in a little easier to recognize fashion. So for my depth, I'm going to give it 1 foot 0 7/8, and our width is going to be 2 foot 1 5/8. Click OK. And I should be able to move this column over to here. Now probably the best way to move this is to click on the center point and then line it up with the center of there. Alright, so I've got one column in. I can use my copy tool and copy it up to the next column. I can do that down here and for our next one. Alright, so I've got those 4 columns drawn. Now I want to copy them over to here. Instead of doing the same thing, I'm going to actually drag my mouse, basically select this whole area, and then up here where it says Filter, so click on that, and I can check None and only check on my columns. Click OK. So basically that'll only select the columns. I can grab my copy tool again, and then just copy these over to here. Now I'm going to draw the columns here a little differently, so we're just going to keep these two rows like this. If you switch to our 3D now, you'll see the columns down here. But I actually want these to go all the way up to our roof level. So again, I'm just going to use kind of that filter technique. Select all of the content of the first floor, click on filter. We only want our columns. And then for our top level, we're going to set that at our lower roof. So now the columns go right up to our lower roof. And you'll see now that where we had all those gaps before, now they're filled in with the columns. And say you want to analyze your building in a section, we can quickly create some sections so we can see through the building. One way you can get to that, up in the very top panel here next to the toggle the line weights tool, is the section. So click on that and you basically will drag or click and then move to one side of the building. This will create this section box right here. You click these arrows, this will flip the section between the two sides like that. And then you can move these toggles right here. This will sort of move the extents of that view of where you're looking. And then a shortcut enabled to get to that section, since when we made it, it popped up in the sections under your project browser over here. But you can also double click on the actual kind of blue tab right here, and this will take you to this section. So again, just to make it a little easier to see, we can switch to our shaded view. We will put from a coarse to a medium. And if I click on this box, this will be sort of your crop region. I just want to move that around so that I can see the whole building. Alright, the next thing I want to do is put in these custom columns that are being shown in one of my sections. So sort of this whole sort of structural element, it's kind of a combination of, there will be a column here, a beam, and then there's even a sort of like a half wall right here. So instead of trying to draw, say, each one of those as like a separate component, which that's probably how I would have drawn it, but I'm going to show you a different way. So I can go up to Architecture, go to Component, and then Model in Place. So I'm going to assign the type of this model just as a generic model. Click OK. I'm just going to call it Custom Column. So once we're in this menu, we're going to want to create a extrusion. So I'm going to click on Extrusion, and then it'll sort of familiarize yourself. You got our Draw tools here, and then our Modify tools. So I'm going to use my Pick Lines tool, and then I'm going to pick the different lines that make up this column. You can see our first floor starting at the 0, so I just want to click on basically this line between them. You can use Tab, and that'll cycle between, say, different overlapping lines. So I'm going to pick these lines here. This one will run all the way up to the top, and then it will run back down. And I can actually use this custom mask here to model our beams that we're going across. So you can see this beam would continue all the way basically to where this column is. So I could use that pick lines and pick where that floor is. So this would continue up here, and then that would run straight across, and then again where that floor is, and it would loop back around and come up to this column. So I've got that. Everything's a bit messy now, so now we're going to use our Trim and Extend tool. So you connect all these together. So you can decide whether it would be faster just to hand trace it or use the Trim tool, and then go in later and fix stuff. So depending on which side of the line you pick, if I picked on this side, it would trim the line to the left, which is not what we want. So you got to make sure that you trim on the right side. So those are the connected. Again, here we'll just pick, say, that line. It doesn't matter too much right now. Make sure those are connected, and then there. Then we can actually change the material of this. So under Material and Finishes, if I click this menu here, we could type in, say, concrete, because our particular version is going to be a concrete column. So we've got that drawn, and I'm going to click on the checkbox here. So we're still in that kind of edit generic model here, but you can see now that we have our whole form in here. Then we're going to click the checkbox again. So switching to our 3D view now, so now we can see kind of where our form is that we just drew. You can see that it sort of cuts through our form a little bit because they're on the same plane. I can go to my first floor, so we can see that column basically right here. And I just want to line it up with this column, so I can actually use these drag markers and just drag it from here to there. Switching back, so now that should line up. Alright, so we've got these 4 here, then it also repeats, I think, 4 or 5 times. So I'm just going to take this, do the same thing we did with our columns, and I'm going to copy it up to the next set. If you find that you can't move it around where you want when you're in the copy, click on the constrain button, and that'll enable you to move it in any direction. And if you have multiple checked, you can actually drag it to multiple locations instead of having to drag it each time. Alright, so switch back to our 3D view. Now you can see we've got all of our columns here on the outside. And then say you knew what, say, the rest of these columns were. Like right now they're all using the same definition, so that rectangular house column. So I could actually click Edit Type, and then Material, I could assign a material to it. So I'm going to assign concrete just like our last ones. Or you can assign whatever material best applies to your house. Click OK. Now they should all be concrete. And then you can see that's where I missed that curtain wall before, so that would be on our second floor. So I can just jump back to there, grab my wall tool, curtain wall, and I'm going to just trace over this area. So the last thing I want to touch on is the roof. So I'm going to switch to my north elevation where I actually have one of my sections shown here. So the roof is basically, we have these 2 or 3 different sections, here, here, and then here. But when I go to my, say, upper or lower roof plans, it's a bit hard to tell kind of where these begin and end. So I can see I have my grids here, and I can actually switch to my elevation views where I have my section. And I can't even take this grid and copy it over to kind of the extents of that roof, so it's a little easier to define where that's being drawn. So right now I'm just going to go up to my lower roof plane and basically draw this roof right here. And this seems like it's actually a pretty thin roof. Maybe we'll call it like 6 inches. So I'm going to go to my roof plan, generic, so I'll just give it a new name, duplicate it, call it 6 inches. Edit the structure and change that to 6 inches. Okay. And I'm just going to do a rough sketch. So it's roughly between this and this column here. And once I have that drawn, I'm actually going to use my Align tool and just align it basically to the edge of that. And then these sort of triangles here are showing me the roof slope on this. So if I left all of these as they are now, which is a 9 to 12 pitch, this will create a hipped roof. If I switch to my 3D view, you can see that's what it looks like. So it's basically putting a slope from each one of those points at that particular pitch. So if I switch back, edit footprint, so now say I get rid of, there's the ones at the end, so I can click on those, uncheck define slope, click OK, go back to 3D, so now we only have a slope on 2 of those sides. So if I go back, click on the roof, edit footprint, I can even uncheck that one and say I want to change the slope on this. I could click on the numbers, say we'll change it to a 3 to 12, Click the checkbox, and now we have a shed roof with a 3/12 pitch. If you want to go with a flat roof, you could just get rid of the slope of all the lines, so highlight that, uncheck define slope, and now we're going to have a flat roof. So to get this to line up with our roof, I'm just going to switch back to our north elevation. So you can see if I try to edit the roof on here, it's not going to let me because it has to be in a, and you can't be in like a section or elevation view when you're looking at the lines, because you'd be looking at them head on, and there's really no way to edit them like that. There's actually one way I could do it. I could measure the distance between here. That's not that great of a measurement. So maybe I could try copying this column over to 11. Let's see if it shows up in our roof plan. Okay, so there's the 11, so that's where the roof needs to go to. Maybe we'll switch back to our other view, and then basically to where I drew it is where that needs to go to. So we go back to lower roof, click on edit footprint. I'm just going to use my align tool and align 11 to that line. Then you'll notice even when you're in a sketch mode, you can actually change between different plans, and it'll basically show that sketch line in all of those views. It actually can be quite helpful, because in this view I can actually see this line right here might have been like an overhead line indicating where the roof is, so I could have gone to this view and then used that line as a reference point. Alright, so I'm going to hit check on this, check it out what it looks like at 3D. I may want to move this line over here, edit footprint. I can actually do this in 3D, so I could click on my align tool, say click on any of these walls right here as where our starting point is, then we're going to click on that roof boundary, and that'll drag that line over to those walls. The checkbox. Alright, so now we're going to draw our upper roof. Just basically going from, say we'll just call it from 2 to 9. So again, we made a level for the upper roof over here, so lower and upper. You go architecture, roof. I'm just going to draw a big rectangle over this. You notice right now it's a little hard to tell what's going on because there's no plan in this view, so I can actually switch back to my lower roof plan. And you notice I am still drawing in our upper roof, but I'm looking in the lower roof plan. So let's see, I'm going to draw it from, I see, maybe 1 to 2. Say I'll draw from this point, basically where it lines up right about here. Again, I don't want any slope on these roofs, so I can select all of them and then uncheck the define slope, and then hit the checkbox. So we've got my upper roof section there. If I go back to my elevation, which is looking at this sectionally, you notice that it doesn't line up that well. So one thing I can do is I can click on this. I'm going to change it to our generic 12-inch. Then I can use my align tool to basically align the top of that roof to this level. So I'm going to click on the level first, and then the top of the roof. Actually, before I'm going to do that, I'm going to undo and align this part of the roof. So I'm going to align this part of the roof to there. And then this part of the roof is actually, I can just measure the 3 1/4 from the 2 marker. So I can go back into my upper roof. So I click on this, edit footprint. So I'm going to line this back to 2 and then offset it. So that's right next to the align tool, the offset tool. I do not want to copy it, I just want to put it over 3 1/4 inches. To there, click OK. Go back to my north elevation. And you'll see that's lined up, and then I can just grab my align tool, click on the level, and align the top of the roof. And we're going to do one more for this section here. So this will basically, I'll probably just do it from 9 to 10. Again, architecture, we're going to go to roof, just grab a rectangle, drag it from there all the way to 10. And on mine, I have flat roof, so I'm going to uncheck the define slope and click the checkbox. You can see it's using the generic 6-inch roof, which is what I want. And I'm just going to use the align tool and align the roof like this. So you can see it's a little confusing about what's going on. I think partly it's because this house has a lot of stuff, a lot of unique geometry, so it's kind of hard to tell. But right, so we've got our house. Right now it's just kind of floating in air, so I can show you a real quick trick for putting some topography underneath it. So I'm going to switch back to our first floor ground. Now this kind of only apply if your building is sitting on a flat surface. If you have like anything other than that, if it's sloped, you'd probably want to get a existing like a topography or contour plane in and use that. So I'm going to go up to massing and site and click on topography. It's actually telling me that it's not going to be visible, so I'm just going to uncheck that, go back to my visibility and graphic settings for this view, and I'm going to scroll down all the way so you can see that topography is not checked. So that's why it's telling us that we're not going to be able to see it. So I'm going to check on topography, click on OK, then I'm going to go back to the topo surface. So normally you'd import some sort of plan for this, but I'm just going to place points at a particular elevation. So I'm just going to leave it at 0. I'm just going to click on 4 points that are roughly at 4 corners of this model here. So you can see it'll start drawing that surface like that. Click on the checkbox. I'll switch back to the 3D, and now you can see that we have a surface that the building is sitting on. If I wanted to change what type of material it is, I can click on that, change the material, and we search for some grass. So we'll add that in down here, change it to grass. You can see right now it's showing up as gray, and the reason for that is with our grass material. If I go back to edit that, right now it's basically in the shading view, it's just using a gray color. If I click on use render appearance, it'll basically take the image of the grass and use that color for the render. Then I could uncheck that, say I want it to be a little bit lighter green because I don't want it too dark. I can change it to a lighter green, click OK. And now we have a nice kind of a grass here. Even more stuff you can do, you can turn on your section box and basically enable you to cut a section in this 3D view here. So as I pull this down, I'll see that it's actually cutting into the terrain a little bit. So I can move this around. I can even go right through the building. So I can see what's happening in 3D. So see, now we have a kind of a thin line where our terrain is. That's because if I just drag this down further, it'll basically continue the terrain down. Right now, as you're looking, it's just kind of empty underneath. Alright, so that's the basics of putting walls, floors, and roofs up. The next thing we're going to be covering is some doors, window, and a few more custom components.